Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. The last library that I spent any huge amount of time was the old UNO library. It's now the administration building. And I can't tell you how many times I fell asleep, I'm embarrassed to say, on the library table that I was sitting at, supposed to be studying. Well, it's hardly a boring subject to be in a library. I just didn't get enough sleep. This week on Consider This, we're going to talk about libraries. What's the future for them? I mean, we have the internet. Why do we need libraries? If you ask my guest, she will have plenty to say about that question. Rivka Sass is library director at the Omaha Public Library. It's the biggest city municipal library in the state by far. Right. We handle a big percentage of library goers in the state.
Absolutely.
You are here, what, a year and a half?
18 months.
18 months.
18 months,
okay.
Yeah.
That works about right.
Yeah.
And you came from a ton of places. You have been everywhere and had so many experiences. I mean...
Yeah, the gypsy librarian, I guess. I've worked mostly in Washington, Oregon, with a brief stint in Maryland and part of that time in the private sector.
To be honest with you, and maybe I skipped a library director somewhere along the way in the Omaha Public Library, but they always seemed a little stuffy to me. You don't have to comment. They just always seemed a little stuffy and aloof from the people who want information, love to read. I mean, they're kind of into the reading is such a wonderful thing mode, but not about information and the facility that we have to use it today, which is your big deal.
Yeah, well, my big deal is the library is the heart of the community. It's a place. You don't have to go there. You can get to it online, which is where that whole internet thing comes in. And, it's got resources. I love to read. It's one of the reasons I became a librarian. I really like books. So, theoretically, we should have it all for people.
You know, I recently, I don't go to the library that much, but I love you online, and it's actually encouraged me to get library books more. Let me explain, and then you talk. It's for you to talk. But I didn't know until I went in one day to use the library for something else, or maybe I was voting, I don't know, I vote in the library. And I found out, I said, I've tried to find books, but this is a new database. The old one was really not very good.
Yeah.
And they said, well, do you know that you can do this? And do you know that we have an agreement and on Ralston Library's books are online here? And it turns out 2 weeks later, I needed a book that only Ralston had. And I was able to go down there and they were really cool. And I was like, and I've actually gone online more since that experience. Just somebody took the time to do that.
Well, that's our job and that's what we should be doing. And I don't know if they had time or if you had time for them to show you all the other stuff we have online. If you're a genealogist,
databases,
wow. They're amazing. If you're a genealogist, I went online one night. We subscribed to something called Heritage Quest. I went online about 10 o'clock, and about midnight, my husband came in and said, "Are you ever coming to bed?" And I had just logged in using my library card, started playing around. Well, it's got the census data, it's got family histories. It's this amazing resource. And that's just one of like 35 that we subscribe to. The Oxford English Dictionary online, just amazing stuff. Magazines, newspapers, you name it.
Okay, let me say that if we have a virtual library, so to speak, we don't need bricks and mortar, and we don't need all those stacks of books.
Well, I really disagree.
I know.
And I'll tell you why. I think, a lot of people, the library in your mind is the last library you had an experience with. Okay, you mentioned that you fell asleep in libraries. Well, some people had bad experiences with libraries. Some people have good experiences with libraries. But I really think that the library most of us remember is the library we experienced when we were maybe 9 or 10. And for me, that library was a magical place with a woman who came up to me and said, "Here's a book you'll like." And it was Charlotte's Web. And 40-something years later, librarians are still doing that for kids. And if kids start school and they haven't been read to and they haven't had an experience of going to the library with their parents and curling up with a good book and cuddling and reading together, they start school, and we know this, not ready to learn. So the library has a really important role as a place for very young children, for families, for getting kids excited about learning. It doesn't matter how many computers we have. You have to know how to read before you can be computer literate. You have to be literate. You got to figure. You got to be able to read things and interpret them and understand them, and that's partly where libraries come in.
There's a lady for years and years at Willa Cather Branch Library, and I used to go to the Saturday story time, and even I was the oldest one for a long time because I just kept going and going and going. And the summer reading club,
Yeah.
still have that.
15,000 kids.
Absolutely.
You bet.
The thing is that the library does have a certain atmosphere even today, and families can go there and they can kind of be together and yet go about their own business.
Yeah.
I mean, different people have different interests, but it's still something they can do together. I find that fascinating to watch when families walk in the library.
It's a wonderful dynamic because there is that kind of, I don't know, I think people who know buildings and architecture call it zones. There's the kids zone and the adult zone and all of that. But you go into a place like Willa Cather, great example, and there's a really nice kind of warm place for kids to go, and there's a place for adults to go and sit down and read a magazine or a newspaper. The kids can be there. It's a safe, friendly, warm environment, and you find all your stuff and you leave together.
I've heard that some libraries are looking at the success of like Borders and Barnes and Noble and trying to do a little bit of that kind of thing in libraries. I mean, you're actually having, a coffee place and things like that.
Yeah, well,
Is that a good thing?
I'll tell you my real dream.
Okay.
I don't know if it's appropriate. My real dream.
A girl
is-
can dream, can't
a-
she?
A girl can dream. In Germany, there's and in England, there are libraries that are actually attached to pubs, and I think that's such a cool concept.
Hey, wait a
But,
minute. Wait a minute.
We're maybe
You've
not
got
ready for
trouble
it
with
here.
the kids running or checking out R-rated movies. I think they got to take this one controversy at a
okay.
time.
But
still, the point is, when you even mention that idea, what you're mentioning, in essence, is a place where people go, where they have something in common. They're relaxed.
Yeah.
And they're not in an antiseptic kind of place that
Well,
we
and
used
that's-
to think of libraries as.
Exactly. I mean, the library, we've all changed. We all eat in our cars now. I mean, how many times are you driving down the street?
Don't look at my car,
Yeah,
okay?
and I've got a coffee cup in mine right now. And, the world has changed. We've all changed. We now allow, minimal food, and you can bring your drink in a covered container. That's reality. And people's lives are different. We're busier. We've got to expand and change with the times as well. And we want to be a place where families spend time together. My excitement about libraries stems from the fact that we live in a democracy. Libraries are the cornerstone of a democratic society. There's anything you want to be found in a library. That's what we should have. That's what we do have.
For years and years when I was reporting every day and we were under deadlines, I would call the reference department at the Omaha Public Library, and never did I have, one bit of impatience on the part of the person. If they could help me, they could by that time. If they couldn't, but and to this day, I have the internet, but occasionally there's something I'm under deadline and I can't find it. Because I don't know exactly. I mean, you can search your brains out and not find exactly what you want on the internet. And they have always been able to help me. They still help me to this day. And which just shows me that's one little area where I've really needed, focused information and help. The same happens when you go down there and you just kind of, there's so much.
Well, and I hear a lot from people, well, I buy my books. And I defy you to walk into a Borders or a Barnes & Noble or the best bookstore in the world and find a book that's been out of print for 15 years that really will answer the question you have or really provide the information you need or just a good read. Bookstores don't stock out of print books unless
No.
they're used bookstores that specialize
And
in
they're
that.
following trends. I have a friend that lives here in Omaha who is a very successful romance writer. And a lot of my friends that knew her, she used to be a reporter at Channel 7, said, well, let me read. I have my own personal Victoria Alexander library at
sure.
home because she's my best friend. So I lend these out, but they're getting pretty dog-eared. So, but I said, I bet you can find some in the library. And the point is, there are things that I've had were out of print.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Manuals and kind
Yeah.
of how-to books that I have about fixing a thing that I'll admit I kept longer than I should and, couldn't
But
stand that it was
there's
broken.
a role for that in the library. The library is that place. The consumer information. You're not likely to go in and find, consumer information on a used car in a bookstore necessarily. You're going to find it at the library. You're going to find online from home with your library card the automotive repair database. We've got it. You bet. you know, the wiring diagram that you
I've
need
got to
is in
tell
there.
my husband this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But why wouldn't there just be a virtual? I know you said that you know children and families, and I can't tell you how many times I've just been delighted to watch children go to the children's department or the children's zone, and see, I was
I
ahead
like
of my
the
times.
part.
I zoned out in the library.
Yeah, really. There you go.
And there was just something magical because I can remember doing this, sitting on the floor, right by a bunch of books and pulling them out,
Yeah.
and you know, touching. And it's a very tactile experience that the computer, like I said, you have to love reading before you know
Yeah. Well, one of my worst nightmares is the idea of a group of kids sitting somewhere watching a PowerPoint demonstration of a storybook. There's no, now that's a nightmare. To me, there's no substitute for that experience where a really good librarian who really loves what she's doing or he's doing is sitting with a group of kids and sharing that experience of literature. And, you know, I'm going to bring my husband into this. He's a clinical social worker. And one of the things that he used to do when he worked with families who were having communication issues and maybe weren't dealing with one another very well, he'd send them to the library, and their assignment would be get a library card, check out a book, and sit down and read together for 15 minutes a day. You can't argue, you can't fight when you're sitting there with your arms around one another reading a book together. And you know, that's an experience that is valuable on so many levels, especially for very young children, because what's happening is their parents are modeling the behavior that we want them to manifest in themselves. They're excited about reading. You know, that's still, to me, a wonderful thing. I love the internet. I love what it does for libraries, but when it comes down to it, I want people to love what they can get from reading.
We've been intrigued by the internet just because of the speed of it, but because it's kind of a one-stop shopping. It feels like that way. I can find it, but really, it isn't, in the sense that there are many people that cannot afford a computer still. There are many people who cannot afford further education. Lifelong learning is not a luxury anymore. No. It's mandatory, with an average of 3 career changes in a lifetime. And that is probably going to go up for the next generation. Not just job changes, career changes. So the ability to get your hands on or to find material to help you solve a problem, learn things, build it. You can't afford necessarily to drop what you're doing and go to college.
That's right.
We just have to serve all kinds of learning needs.
And you think about, you know, this is a community that's pretty diverse. We don't think about it, but it really is a pretty diverse community, and there are a lot of people who come here. They're new in this country. They maybe not be literate in their own language. They may not be literate in English. And they can't afford to go to school because they're busy working and trying to make a better life for their children who are in school here. So that's another place where the library comes in. We offer computer training classes on Saturdays in Spanish at one of our libraries because there's a need for it. And you know, people come in. We offer family literacy programs where families come in together and read and experience the library and actually talk about books.
And that's not just an issue of our newer residents. From I've taught literacy, and people that, you know, they're able to hide it so well you would never know, and that's a safe place to do it.
That's right. We're non-threatening, we're safe, we're friendly, and we should have those resources that meet all of those different needs in people's lives at those different stages.
It wasn't long after you came here that they had to cut the library hours because of some real life budget constraints. They have restored some of those hours.
We're back to 7-day-a-week service in our 3 largest libraries. We've added a few hours here and there to our smaller libraries. We're looking at how we staff. You know, my goal is to, of course, have library hours when people need them, which in my opinion is 24 hours a day, but that's where the virtual library comes in.
I'll give you an example that will tickle you. My friend that I was talking about, the writer, her son put off getting a copy of The Great Santini, which he needed for a Creighton Prep class. Well, to show you that people are still using the libraries, Borders, Barnes & Noble were sold out, and the Omaha Public Library's umpteen copies were all checked out. So obviously there's still
You bet.
Still a need with these kids that only are glued to the internet.
But my guess is there are resources we have that maybe he didn't think of that we could have used. We subscribe to a database called Novelist. He could have gone in there, yeah, okay, wouldn't have read the book, wouldn't have the full text of the book, but it would have had reviews, it would have had critiques. We have all of these things, again, available 2 in the morning.
Or just a couple hours there in addition to reading
Yeah.
it, you aced that,
Absolutely.
that segment of the literature
Absolutely.
course.
You got it.
Statewide, I know there are efforts to, obviously, economy of scale is good if you can do things on a statewide basis, and we are a very diverse state, but what things are they working on that either you're involved or observing in making Nebraska assuring the spot for libraries and information?
We have a great state library agency, the Nebraska Library Commission, and one of the things that they do, and I love this, and it's a great model, you know, in my opinion, for every state in the union, and there are a few states that do it, but Nebraska does it really well. They negotiate contracts for everybody in the state to access a database. So we get it at the Omaha Public Library. You can access it with a library card. But let's say you live somewhere in Nebraska where there isn't a library. If you have a state ID card or a driver's license, you can get into that database through the
So
Nebraska.
it'll recognize that you're a Nebraskan.
And that is awesome because, you know, this is a state where there aren't libraries in every county and every
So they're
community.
probably paying these database, or whoever you know charges for the database based on the population and the
Right.
normal use in a state,
Yeah.
and so that includes everybody. That's one of the more
Yeah.
inclusive things,
It's a
like public
wonderful thing.
television or something.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
it reaches across all kinds of geographic
Yeah.
and access.
And that's what it's all about. It's called Nebraska Access, as a matter of fact. And I think it's a great resource. And, you know, at Omaha, we kind of leverage our ability to share what the state provides for libraries and communities all around the state. And we also, because of that, we can get sort of better deals with database vendors and license things at a reduced cost so that, you know, we can be very efficient here. And we have awesome resources, you know, thanks to that.
Speaking of efficiency, there were plans at one time, and I'll admit I've lost track, of a joint library with Metro Community College in South Omaha. Has that come to fruition, or is it getting anywhere?
Well, as a matter
Or
of
is it
fact,
dead?
no, actually, I just left a meeting today, just before I came here, where we were meeting with the architects and reviewing the final design plans so that now we go into the construction design documents, and you know, we're looking at going out to bid this summer. And
Well, that's an example where you're marrying sort of this lifelong learning to this and exposing more people to libraries, out of necessity, because the teachers will obviously make better use of the resources, but probably than their families and things, because many people have to work around that attend something like Metro, family schedules, work schedules. They're usually part-time
Well,
students.
I mean, I noticed in here there's a baby changing table in the women's restroom.
Yes.
People are.
There's even a lactation station
There
now.
you
That's
go.
the newest addition.
So the reality is, students come in all shapes and sizes, and they're part of a family a lot of times. And I think it's a great idea to have a joint use facility where I think we're that much more efficient. We'll be open more hours than we could be as an Omaha Public Library.
Again, leveraging resources.
Leveraging resources. That's what it's all about. You know, I would put libraries. My other dream, is a library with a Borders attached. You can't find what you want at the library, you go next door and there's Borders. You know, I think there are lots of options we haven't even.
I mean,
thought of.
people like to buy books, or if it's a how-to book, they want to
Yeah.
keep it for a while, or there's a
Yeah.
reason they want to. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't read the whole. I had an edited version, but I don't think I could have done the whole Lewis and Clark thing from their journals
Yeah.
in one, 28 days that I
Yeah.
get from the library, because that's something I only had to take in small doses.
Yeah, right.
So I recently went out to Seward, Nebraska, and they have a new library there. They have a beautiful new library in Ralston. It's so wonderful to see that cities and towns are saying this is a priority, but I worry with the economic crunch that we've had in all our states, but in Nebraska with the drought as well. And we just read in the paper that our income did not go up as much last year as some of the surrounding states. So where does sort of the brick and mortar of a library, so that we
Well,
have touchy-feely experiences to
Yeah.
remember?
I think one of the issues here now, my most recent place before I lived here was Portland, Oregon, which is a very compact city. And the libraries physically were much smaller there, much busier, much smaller. It's a larger community. I think one of the
Costly
things,
real estate.
yeah, I think one of the things we have to look at is that option, that opportunity to consider joint facilities. I think the other thing, but I think it comes down to, you know, I mean what I say when I say the library is the heart of a community. So I think the community has to decide how important is it for us to have that quality of life. And it is a quality of life issue. I've talked to people who've moved here from other places, and they're sort of appalled at our limited hours and you know, the age of our collection and all of these things that I, you know, would
Truly?
love.
I mean, I not having anything else to relate to, I think that, you know, we do have pretty good access, and
Yeah.
but you would be more familiar with.
It's you know, in the words of Garrison Keillor, in a way, it's pretty good access. I think it's above average. But when you've lived in a place like Portland or Seattle or Denver, where, you know, so many people in the community have library cards and the libraries are funded, you know, 3-4 times what we are funded here, the expectations grow. So the expectations are kind of in line with the way libraries are funded. And, you know,
And what are some of those expectations that maybe we don't meet or exceed?
Well, I think they are really low here. I mean, I've met more people since moving to Omaha who say, well, I buy my books, than any other place. And a good example, I was at a book club last night with a group of highly educated women. It was really fun. And I was the only one who had a copy of a library book. And everybody else had bought the book. And, you know,
Which is great for the economy.
It's great for the economy, but, you know, I'm not sure I'd want to keep that book for 10 years.
I just went through the problem of my house is almost all books, and I have got to stop. Number one, I had to get rid of them, so I tried to find friendly homes for all of them, and that could take years. But I went on a journey. Well, finally, I had to stop. I said I have to give these books away.
And you can give those to the Friends of the Omaha Public Library, Swanson Library. We have quarterly book sales.
Yeah, they
all
have
of that.
little books for a quarter, then they have
Yeah.
a free thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that intrigues me. Every time I go in to
Oh,
vote, I
yeah.
buy a couple of books, which is what I need.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But the Friends, actually, we're recycling in a way. The Friends sell books, and we use that money both for programs to support things like summer reading or our family prime time, those kinds of things, and we buy more materials with them. So it's a good thing.
Now, you have worked in libraries large and small. If, say you lived out in Ogallala or Scotts Bluff, and I know you've at least had some time to talk with librarians from all over the state, what are their concerns?
You know, I think we all have the same concerns.
Just
at this
of a
point.
different
I
magnitude?
think it's a magnitude of scale. You know, we all want to be important to our communities. We all want to have enough resources to meet those community needs, and we all want people to recognize that there's a role for us, even in the 21st century, even with high-speed internet access, you know, even with all of these great resources, there's still a role for the library.
I should tell the viewers a little story. Last Saturday, I attended something I was covering for NET Radio. It was a dialogue sponsored by UNO here, the Black Studies Department, regarding our Sudanese immigrants, the refugees that have come here. Now, it was called a dialogue, but there were people there that serve immigrants, those who are interested in being helpful, immigrants themselves. And you were there with some of your library people making things available both for the service person to the Sudanese and for the Sudanese. And when a Sudanese woman who they're starting a women's group to support each other said, and we need to find a place to meet.
Yeah.
You said, we have meeting rooms. And
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, again, people don't even think to ask. Well, that's a great resource that the library has. You know, every one of our locations has some spot where we can help people, whether it's a quiet study area where a tutor and a literacy student need to meet, whether it's a group of mothers who then could also make use of the other resources we have. We have children's librarians who have expertise in literature that again would help kids get ready for school, help the moms, and provide a dialogue.
It's sort of like a mini community that's based on, and instead of an environment of we physically grow, we physically have needs, you know,
Yeah.
clothes and that a family does. It's kind of a home based on learning, not like school. you know, where
Right.
it's fed in certain amounts.
Well, and the whole thing, and the whole reason I became a librarian in the first place was that idea of you don't have to go into a place like a public library. You go there, you know, sometimes you have to. You need something. You're doing a school report or something. But really, it's a place that's there for you to explore anything you want. And to me, that's, you know, that's awesome.
Okay, Rivka Sass has all the money she needs in the world to do, you know, 2 or 3 major changes in this very large system that we have here. What would they be? In other words, what's not in your annual budget because you only put in what you know you might be able to get?
Well, the first thing I would do is open even our smaller facilities 6 days a week, and we'd be open hours that people need us. We'd have enough staff to do the community outreach we need. We'd be meeting with community members and finding out what those needs are, and the collection would be to die for. It would be, you know, you'd be able to walk in and you'd find those, you know, you'd find a browsing shelf of bestsellers, and, you know, you might only have a week to read it, but you don't have to buy it. You can check it out of the library. We'd have extended programs, services, you name it. But the collection, hours, that's what we need.
I tell you, one of the cool things is that you can go on and put your name on a waiting list online. So you're combining your home internet, and they'll alert you
That's right.
when it's there. I mean, I've
And
done
we'll
that
send
3 or
it-
4 times. It's like, I did it just to see if I could do it, and it works so slick.
And it doesn't matter where the item is. If it's, you know, if you live near Swanson Library and the item's at Florence, we have a delivery van who will.
With a big red O on it, I
You bet.
saw.
Oh, what a library.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So the future of libraries, do you think they're sound? Do you think they're solid?
I think, you know, I think it depends. I think it depends on the community. In Omaha, I think we need to make a decision in the next few years how valuable our library is. Is it the heart of the community? Is it the cornerstone of democracy? Is it worth supporting? I think there are other places that, you know, Seattle just built a $165 million main library. I think the Seattle Public Library is here to stay for a while.
The one good thing about the main library downtown is you're across from this new performing arts center, and there's all kinds of things happening. So hopefully you can find some money to parlay that into some
Absolutely.
cool things.
We have some ideas about some interesting partnerships.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for being with us. Welcome to Omaha 18 months late.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us this week on Consider This.
To view this edition of Consider This or past programs, visit our website at unotv.unomaha.edu. For comments or questions, call 402-554-2516 during regular business hours. Consider This is a production of UNO Television.